The mansion stood tall, wrapped in the kind of luxury that left people speechless. To anyone watching, Williams had it all: money, power, charm, the kind of man people whispered about at cocktail parties and admired from a distance. But there was another side to him, one that only Luna knew. Luna wasn't from Williams's world. She grew up in a small, quiet town, raised on values like kindness and patience. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't loud. She had this quiet elegance that made her stand out without even trying. And when Williams met her at a charity gala, she'd been standing in a corner, clutching a glass of wine, looking like she didn't belong. He had noticed her immediately. "You're not from around here, are you?" he had asked, leaning down slightly to catch her shy smile. She'd looked up, startled, and then smiled nervously. "Is it that obvious?" "In the best way possible," he'd replied, his voice smooth, his charm effortless. "You're refreshing." It hadn't taken long for him to sweep her off her feet. Williams was used to getting what he wanted, and Luna was no exception. He courted her with grand gestures, dinners at the city's finest restaurants, spontaneous trips to Paris, diamonds that sparkled like they belonged in a museum. At first, she thought it was like living in a fairy tale. A handsome, successful man had chosen her. Her friends called her the luckiest woman in the world, and maybe, for a while, she believed it too. But there were cracks in the fairy tale, cracks that Luna tried not to look too closely at. One evening, just a few weeks before their wedding, she'd been going through the color palettes for the flowers. She had chosen soft lavender and white, simple, elegant. But when she showed Williams, his reaction had been quick and cold. "Lavender?" he'd said, barely looking up from his phone. "No, red roses, classic, sophisticated." She had hesitated, biting her lip. "But I think the lavender matches the theme better, don't you think? It feels softer." He put his phone down and looked at her, his expression sharp. "Luna, it's not about what feels right. This is our wedding, my wedding. People are going to talk about it. They'll remember it. Trust me, roses are the way to go." There it was, that tone. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't angry, but it was a voice that left no room for discussion. And just like that, lavender was out and red roses were in. Over time, there were more moments like that, small things. A glance that lingered too long when she wore something he didn't approve of. A subtle sigh when she voiced an opinion he didn't agree with. And though he never raised his voice, he had this way of making her feel like she was wrong, even when she wasn't. But Luna loved him, or at least the version of him she wanted to believe in. The one who kissed her forehead when she was upset, who whispered promises of forever in her ear late at night. She convinced herself that the controlling moments weren't who he really was. She thought she could change him, or that maybe, with time, things would get better. When Luna found out she was pregnant, she genuinely thought that was going to be the turning point for their relationship. She had been so nervous that day, pacing back and forth in their massive bathroom, holding the positive pregnancy test in her trembling hands. Her heart raced as she imagined Williams's reaction. She pictured him lifting her into his arms, spinning her around, his face lighting up with that rare, genuine smile she hadn't seen in months. When he got home that evening, she waited for the right moment. He was sitting in his favorite chair, sipping scotch, scrolling through his emails. She stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure of how to say it. Then she took a deep breath and stepped closer. "Williams," she said softly, clutching the pregnancy test behind her back. He glanced up at her briefly, his face neutral. "Yes, Her voice wavered and she quickly cleared her throat. "I have some news, big news." That got his attention. He set his glass down, tilting his head slightly. "Go on." Luna stepped closer, holding out the test with a nervous smile. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes, surprise, happiness, but it was gone as quickly as it came. He stood up slowly, taking the test from her hand and looking at it as though it were a business document he needed to analyze. "Pregnant," he repeated, his tone flat. Her smile faltered. "Yes," she said softly. Isn't it wonderful?" He set the test down on the coffee table and rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, I suppose congratulations are in order." She blinked, her heart sinking. "You suppose?" "It's just, this is unexpected," he said, pacing slightly. "I mean, with everything going on at work and with the timing." Luna felt her chest tighten. "Williams, this is a baby, our baby." "Yes, I understand that," he said quickly. "I'm just saying it's a lot to take in." She nodded slowly, forcing a smile. "Of course, I understand. It's a surprise for me, too." He stopped pacing and looked at her, his expression softening slightly. "It's good news, Luna," he said, reaching out to touch her arm. I'm just processing it, that's all. She nodded again, swallowing the lump in her throat. Of course, she repeated. Take your time. She wanted to believe that his reaction was just shock, that he'd come around, that he'd be excited eventually. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered that nothing was going to change. For the next few months, Luna poured all her energy into preparing for the baby. She picked out cribs, painted the nursery, bought tiny clothes that made her heart swell. Williams was there, but only physically. He nodded when she asked his opinion on baby names, but didn't offer any suggestions. He went to the doctor's appointments, but his eyes were always on his phone, answering emails, checking stocks. Luna told herself it was just his way. He wasn't good at expressing emotions, but that didn't mean he didn't care. He would come around. He had to. She clung to that hope even as the cracks in their relationship deepened, even as the distance between them grew. She convinced herself that once the baby arrived, everything would fall into place. They would be a family. And families, she thought, were worth fighting for. But Luna had no idea just how much her world was about to change. Luna lay on the bed, exhausted but glowing with the kind of joy that only a new mother could feel. She cradled her twin boys in her arms, her face a mixture of awe and disbelief as she studied their tiny features, their delicate fingers, their little button noses, the way their lips trembled as they slept. They were beautiful, so perfect and so very different. Her heart swelled with love, but at the same time her mind raced with confusion. The twins' skin was dark, a warm, rich brown that stood in stark contrast to her pale complexion. Luna tried to make sense of it. Her father had mentioned once, long ago, that his grandmother was of mixed race, but it had always seemed like a distant detail, like something that didn't quite belong to her. Could that be it? Could genetics be this unpredictable? She brushed a soft curl of hair from one of the boys' foreheads and whispered, Kai. She turned to the other, her voice catching as she smiled. Jordan. The names she had spent months choosing rolled off her tongue like they were always meant to belong to these boys. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. The nurse peeked her head in, smiling warmly. Your husband just arrived. He's on his way up. Luna's heart skipped a beat. She had been waiting for this moment, for Williams to see their sons, to share this joy with her. She smoothed the blanket around the babies, adjusted her hair, and tried to push down the nervous flutter in her chest. Whatever questions she had about the boy's appearance, they could figure it out together. They were a family, after all. The door swung open, and there he was, Williams. He'd come straight from an important meeting. For a moment, she felt a flicker of relief seeing him, his presence filling the room with its usual weight. He paused in the doorway, his eyes scanning the scene before him. Williams, Luna said softly, her voice filled with hope. Come meet your sons. But he didn't move. His eyes narrowed as they landed on the babies. The warmth she had hoped for, the joy she had imagined on his face, was nowhere to be found. Instead, his jaw clenched, his expression darkening with every passing second. What is this? He asked, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the air. Luna blinked, confused. What do you mean, Williams? These are our boys. He stepped closer, his movements stiff, his eyes locked on the twins. No, he said, shaking his head, his voice growing louder. No, don't do this to me, Luna. Her stomach sank. What are you talking about? Williams, please? Don't play dumb, he snapped, his voice cracking with a mix of anger and disbelief. You think I'm blind? Look at them. He gestured sharply at the babies, his face twisting with something that looked almost like disgust. They're not mine. The words hit her like a slap. Her breath caught in her throat, and she instinctively clutched the babies closer to her chest. What are you saying? She whispered, her voice trembling. Of course they're yours, Williams. They're our sons. He laughed bitterly, running a hand through his hair. You expect me to believe that? Look at their skin, Luna. Do I look like a fool to you? Tears filled her eyes, spilling over as she shook her head. I don't understand. Don't lie to me, he roared, his voice echoing off the sterile hospital walls. The nurse from earlier peeked into the room, alarmed by the commotion, but Williams waved her off, his glare silencing her. Luna sobbed, her voice breaking as she pleaded, I swear, Williams, I've never betrayed you. I don't know why I trusted you. He interrupted. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? With someone else's children? They're not someone else's, she cried, her voice shaking as she struggled to explain what even she didn't fully understand. They're yours. I don't know why their skin is darker, but they're ours, Williams, please. But he wasn't listening. He was pacing now, his hands clenched into fists, his breathing heavy. I should have seen this coming, he muttered, more to himself than to her. You were too good to be true. A girl like you, falling into my lap like some charity case. Luna flinched at his words, her heart shattering as the man she had loved, the man she had built her life around, unraveled before her eyes. How can you say that? She whispered. After everything we've been through? He stopped pacing, turning to face her with an icy glare. I want a divorce. Her world stopped. The word hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. No, she said, shaking her head, her voice barely audible. Williams, please don't do this. It's done, he said, his voice void of emotion. You can keep them. He spat the word like it was venom. But I'm done. I'm not raising another man's kids. Luna broke down completely, her sobs racking her body as she clung to her sons. You can't just walk away. They're your children, Williams. They're your family. But he was already walking toward the door, his back stiff, his hand on the handle. He paused for a moment, his shoulders tense. You brought this on yourself, Luna, he said without turning around. I hope you're happy. And then he was gone. The door closed behind him with a deafening click, leaving Luna alone in the sterile hospital room, her heart shattered, her life in ruins. The twins stirred in her arms, their tiny faces scrunching up as if they could feel her pain. She kissed their foreheads, her tears falling onto their soft skin. I've got you, she whispered, her voice trembling. I won't let you go, I promise. I'll never let you go. The room was quiet again, except for the soft cries of the babies and the sound of Luna's heart breaking into pieces. The air felt heavy as Luna stood outside Maria's small home, clutching Kai and Jordan tightly in her arms. The boys were wrapped in blankets, their tiny heads resting against her shoulders, their breaths warm against her neck. It was late, the street dimly lit by a flickering street lamp. Maria opened the door with a soft smile, pulling her cardigan tighter around her. Come in, Luna, Maria said gently, stepping aside to let them in. The warmth of the house hit Luna immediately, a stark contrast to the cold, unforgiving night outside. You'll catch your death out there. Luna stepped inside, her voice low. Thank you, Maria. I didn't know where else to go. Her eyes darted to the floor as though she were ashamed, but Maria wouldn't let her linger in that feeling. Maria waved her hand dismissively. You're family now, that's all there is to it. Come on, let's get these little angels to bed. The guest room was small, barely enough space for the twin bed and a small dresser, but to Luna, it felt like a sanctuary. She laid Kai and Jordan down gently, tucking the blankets around them and brushing her fingers over their soft curls. They didn't stir, exhausted from the day's chaos, but the world outside Luna's small apartment felt colder and more hostile than ever before. She had always thought the hardest part of her life was behind her, that the pain of Williams, abandoning her and the boys, was the deepest wound she'd ever endure. But she had been wrong. What came after his departure was a storm she could never have imagined, and it left her grasping for strength she wasn't sure she had left. It started the day after she left the hospital. She hadn't even had time to catch her breath, to process her new reality as a single mother, before her name was splashed across every gossip column, tabloid, and social media platform. She had known Williams was powerful, but this was something else. The headlines were everywhere. Gold digger wife exposed. Millionaire betrayed by unfaithful spouse. Scandal. Infidelity shocks high society. Her photo was plastered on every article, often edited to make her look disheveled or distraught. One particularly cruel image had been snapped as she left the hospital, holding Kai and Jordan in her arms, her face pale and tired. The caption underneath read, "Caught in the act, cheating wife finally falls from grace." Luna stared at her phone in disbelief, her hands trembling. She had clicked on one article after another, hoping against hope that maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But it was worse. Williams had clearly wasted no time spinning a narrative to protect his reputation. In his version of the story, she was the villain, the woman who had tricked him into marriage, the unfaithful wife who had destroyed his trust, and now the manipulative mother trying to trap him with children who weren't his. God, no, she whispered to herself, tears spilling onto her cheeks as she read the hateful comments beneath the articles. What a disgrace. Typical gold digger, probably planned this all along. Feels sorry for Williams, poor guy married a cheater. She should be ashamed of herself. Her stomach twisted painfully as she scrolled, unable to look away despite the sharp sting each word left in her chest. The more she read, the heavier the weight on her heart became. She felt like the world was closing in on her, suffocating her with its judgment. She wanted to scream the truth, to tell everyone that she hadn't cheated, that the twins were Williams's sons. But the truth didn't seem to matter. Once people believed a lie, it became impossible to shake it. A week later, she experienced the full force of the fallout. She had gone to the grocery store to pick up diapers and formula for the boys. The simple trip, something she had done 1,000 times before, now felt like walking into a war zone. As she moved through the aisles, clutching her shopping basket, she noticed the stares. People whispered behind their hands, their eyes darting toward her and then quickly away when she glanced in their direction. One woman nudged her friend, not bothering to keep her voice down as she said, "That's her, the gold digger. Can you believe she has the nerve to show her face in public?" Luna's throat tightened, her cheeks burning with humiliation. She kept her head down, trying to ignore the whispers, the stares, the judgment that seemed to follow her like a shadow. But it was impossible to tune it out completely. Everywhere she turned, it felt like someone was looking at her, like everyone knew her name and her story, the wrong version of her story. At the checkout line, the cashier, a young girl with wide, curious eyes, handed her the receipt and hesitated. Are you?" The girl trailed off, clearly unsure if she should say what was on her mind. Luna didn't respond, just grabbed her bag and walked away as quickly as she could, her heart pounding in her chest. When she got home, she broke down. She sat on the edge of her bed, holding Kai and Jordan close to her, and cried until her body felt empty. "Why is this happening?" she whispered to the tiny, innocent faces looking up at her. "Why can't they just leave us alone?" The worst moment came during the court hearing. Williams had insisted on a DNA test, his way of proving to the world that the boys weren't his. Luna had agreed, hoping that the results would finally shut down the rumors and give her some sense of justice. But when the day came, she realized just how naive she had been. The courtroom was tense, the air heavy with anticipation. Williams sat across the room from her, his expression cold and unyielding. He didn't so much as glance in her direction. Luna sat with the twins in her lap, her friend Maria beside her, offering silent support. The judge opened the envelope containing the DNA test results and read them aloud. The results conclusively prove that Mr. Williams is the biological father of both children. Luna's heart swelled with relief, tears springing to her eyes. For a moment, she thought this might change everything, that Williams would see the truth, that the accusations would stop, that her boys would finally have their father. But Williams's reaction shattered that hope. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I don't care what the test says," he said, his voice icy and loud enough to echo through the room. "They'll never be mine." The words hit Luna like a physical blow. She felt her breath leave her body, her hands tightening around the boys, as if to shield them from the cruelty of their father's words. The room was silent, everyone staring at Williams in shock, but he didn't seem to care. He stormed out of the courtroom, leaving Luna sitting there, stunned and broken. Later that night, as she sat in her small, dimly lit apartment, Luna thought about everything she had lost. Her marriage, her reputation, her peace of mind. It felt like the world had turned against her, like there was no way out of the darkness that had consumed her life. She stood in front of the mirror on the old wooden dresser, the soft yellow light of the bedside lamp casting long shadows across her face. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman she hardly recognized anymore. Her cheeks were hollow from the weight of sleepless nights and skipped meals, and her eyes were rimmed with red, evidence of the tears that never seemed to stop flowing. "Enough," she whispered, her voice trembling but determined. "They need you to be strong." Behind her, the soft sound of Kai and Jordan's breathing filled the room. The twins were curled up together on a makeshift bed on the floor, their tiny faces peaceful, unaware of the storm their mother was facing. Luna turned to look at them, her heart swelling with both love and fear. She knelt down and gently tucked the blanket around them, brushing her fingers across their little curls. They were her anchor, her purpose. No matter how hard it got, she wouldn't let them see her break. The next morning, Luna woke before the sun rose. Her friend Maria's modest guest room wasn't much, but it was shelter, and Luna was grateful. She quietly gathered her few belongings, a neatly pressed blouse and an old leather handbag, and kissed her boys on the forehead before slipping out the door. Maria had offered to watch them while Luna went out to look for work. As Luna walked through the streets clutching a stack of resumes she had carefully prepared the night before. She had no fancy degrees, no glowing recommendations from influential people, but she had a willingness to work and a fierce determination. That had to count for something, didn't it? Her first stop was a small office building, the kind of place where she hoped they wouldn't care about the headlines or the gossip. She walked in, trying to summon every ounce of confidence she had left. "Hello," she said to the receptionist, a polite smile on her lips. "I'm here to apply for the administrative assistant position." The receptionist barely looked at her before glancing at the newspaper spread open on her desk. Luna's stomach dropped as she saw her own face staring back at her from the front page. The receptionist's polite smile turned strained. "I'm sorry," she said, her tone clipped. "The position's been filled." It was the same story at every place she went. People smiled at first, took her resume, and then paused as recognition dawned. Some were polite, offering vague excuses. Others weren't. "We don't need someone like you here," one manager said bluntly, his lips curling into a sneer. Luna nodded, swallowing her pride, and left without a word. By the time the day ended, she had a dozen rejection slips in her handbag and blistered feet from walking across town. She sat on a bench in the park, her hands trembling as she opened her bag and stared at the resumes that no one wanted. The temptation to cry was overwhelming, but she clenched her jaw and blinked back the tears. Later that night, after the boys had fallen asleep, Luna sat at the small kitchen table in Maria's home, surrounded by papers and books. She had enrolled in a free night class at the local community center, a program designed for single mothers who wanted to improve their skills. The instructor had been kind, offering words of encouragement as Luna explained her situation. Now, she sat with her notes spread out in front of her, trying to focus on the coursework despite the exhaustion tugging at her. The days turned into weeks, and the rejection letters kept coming, but Luna refused to give up. Maria often watched her with quiet admiration. "You're stronger than you think, you know," she said one evening, handing Luna a cup of tea as she sat hunched over her book. Luna gave her a tired smile. "I don't feel strong," she admitted. "Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together." "But you are," Maria replied, "and that's what matters." Luna nodded, her grip tightening around her pen. She didn't feel strong, but she knew she couldn't stop. Every rejection, every harsh whisper, every sideways glance, she would endure it all for her sons. She would show them what resilience looked like, what love looked like. A few weeks passed before Luna finally landed a job. Fast forward a few years later, Luna's office job was a blessing in disguise, but the hours were long and the pay barely enough to scrape by. Maria had offered to watch the boys while she worked, and Luna didn't know how she would have managed without her friend's help. As she walked to the bus stop, clutching her coat tightly around her, Luna thought about the life she wanted to build for Kai and Jordan. She imagined them running through a yard of their own, coming home to a house filled with laughter instead of whispers. That dream was what kept her going, even when her legs ached and her heart felt heavy. The office was a small, cramped space with buzzing fluorescent lights and the constant hum of printers and fax machines. Luna worked diligently, her eyes fixed on her computer screen as she typed up reports and sorted through endless stacks of paperwork. Her co-workers rarely spoke to her, and she noticed the way their conversations would hush whenever she walked by. During her lunch break, Luna overheard two women whispering near the water cooler. "That's her," one of them said, glancing in Luna's direction. "The one from the papers. Can you believe she's working here?" The other woman snorted. "Desperate, I guess. You'd think someone like her would have disappeared by now." She clenched her fists under the table, focusing on her breathing until the sting of their words dulled. She couldn't afford to let them see her break. Not here. Not ever. By the time her shift ended, Luna's feet were aching and her head throbbed from staring at the screen all day. But the moment she stepped off the bus and saw Kai and Jordan waiting for her in the window, their faces lighting up when they saw her, all the exhaustion melted away. "Mommy!" Kai shouted, running to the door as Luna walked in. Jordan followed, holding up a crayon drawing he had made. "Look, Mommy, it's you and me and Kai." Luna knelt down, pulling them both into her arms. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm going to hang it up, okay?" That night, after the boys were asleep, Luna sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, her hands wrapped tightly around the mug. Maria sat across from her, folding laundry. "You did good today," Maria said, breaking the silence. Luna shook her head. It doesn't feel like it. I'm barely making enough to cover anything. And people, they don't let me forget what they think of me. Maria raised an eyebrow. What do they know? Those people don't see what I see. They don't see a mother working her fingers to the bone to give her kids a better life. They don't see the strength it takes to get up every day and keep going. Luna smiled faintly, her eyes welling up. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Maria waved her hand. Oh, stop. You do the same for me. As the weeks turned into months, Luna fell into a routine. She worked late nights at the office, came home to tuck her boys into bed, and spent her weekends with them at the park or reading stories on the couch. The whispers and judgment from the neighbors never stopped, but Luna learned to block them out. Her focus was on Kai and Jordan, and nothing else mattered. One evening, as she sat on the floor with the boys, helping them stack blocks into a towering castle, Kai looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. Mommy, are we going to have a big house one day? Like the one in your pictures? Jordan asked, his little hands gripping a block tightly. Luna nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Even better, she said softly. We're going to have a house filled with love and laughter, and you're going to grow up so happy and strong. The boys beamed at her, their innocence and trust filling the room with a warmth Luna hadn't felt in a long time. The playground was supposed to be a place of joy, with laughter and the carefree chatter of kids bouncing from one end of the swings to the monkey bars. But for Kai and Jordan, it often felt like a battlefield. As the twins sat on a patch of grass near the basketball court, their backpacks at their sides, around them other kids ran and played, but the whispers and muffled giggles were unmistakable, even through the noise of the playground. Hey, Kai, a voice rang out. It was Mason, one of the older boys, flanked by a few others, all wearing the smug smirks that only middle school bullies seemed to perfect. Kai looked up cautiously, his hands tightening on the straps of his backpack. What do you want, Mason? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Mason sauntered closer, hands shoved into his pockets. Just wondering if your mom's still busy being, a liar and a cheater. Jordan, who had been scribbling something in a small notebook, froze mid-word. He glanced at Kai, who was already standing up, his fists clenched at his sides. Don't talk about our mom, Kai said, his voice low but firm. Why not? Mason sneered. Everybody knows. My dad says she's the reason your dad left. Said he couldn't even stand to be around her. Guess it runs in the family. The words hit like a slap, but before Kai could say anything, Jordan sprang to his feet, stepping in front of his brother. That's not true, he shouted, his face flushed with anger. You don't know anything. Mason laughed, and so did the others behind him. Oh, we know plenty, Mason said, shrugging casually. And everyone else does too. That's why nobody wants to sit with you at lunch. You're just the kids of a... Enough, Kai yelled, his voice louder than he'd intended. His chest heaved with a mix of rage and humiliation, but Mason didn't look intimidated. Instead, he smirked, giving the other boys a look that said, See? Told you they'd get mad. Come on, guys, Mason said, turning away with a dismissive wave. Let's leave them alone. Not worth it. As the boys walked off, their laughter trailing behind them, Kai and Jordan stood frozen in place. Kai's fists were still clenched, and Jordan's eyes shone with unshed tears. Jordan, Kai said finally, his voice quieter now, don't listen to them. I'm not, Jordan said quickly, though his trembling lip betrayed him. They're just jerks. They don't know anything. But they did, or at least they thought they did, and it wasn't the first time this had happened. It wasn't even the 10th. The rumors about their mom had followed them since they were old enough to understand words like cheater and liar. At first, they didn't know what the whispers meant, but as they grew older, the puzzle pieces started to fit together, and it became harder and harder to ignore the weight of those words. When they got home that day, the house was quiet, and the silence in the house felt heavier than usual. Luna sat at the kitchen table. Across from her, Kai and Jordan sat quietly, their small faces marked with a sadness she hadn't seen in a while. Their school bags sat forgotten by the door, and the usual chatter and giggles of the evening routine were nowhere to be found. Jordan poked at the plate of apple slices Luna had set in front of them. He wasn't eating, just moving a piece back and forth, staring at it like it held the answers to whatever was troubling him. Beside him, Kai rested his chin in his hands, his dark curls falling into his face, hiding his red-rimmed eyes. Luna had noticed something was wrong the moment they walked through the door. The boys usually bounded in with stories about their day, but today they had shuffled in quietly, their heads down, their usual energy drained. It had taken her until now to find the right moment to ask. "Do you want to talk about it?" Luna asked softly, not wanting to push too hard. The boys exchanged a quick glance but didn't answer right away. Kai shifted uncomfortably in his seat while Jordan sighed, still not looking up from the table. Finally, Kai spoke, his voice small and trembling. "Mom," he started, his lips trembling slightly. "Why do they hate us?" Luna's heart broke at the sound of his words. She straightened up in her chair, her hands tightening around the mug. "Hate you? Who, baby?" "The kids at school," Jordan muttered, his voice barely audible. "They keep saying stuff about us, about you, about how we don't belong here." Kai's eyes welled up with tears as he added, "They said we're weird because we look different, that we don't fit in, and they said you're a liar, that you're the reason Dad left." His voice cracked on the last word, and a tear slipped down his cheek, which he quickly wiped away with the back of his hand. Luna felt a sharp pang in her chest. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, and looked at her boys, really looked at them. They were just kids, innocent and kind, and it shattered her to know they were carrying this weight on their little shoulders. She reached out, taking their hands in hers. "Oh, my loves," her voice trembling, but steadying as she continued. "Listen to me. What they said doesn't make it true," she said softly. "I'm so sorry you had to hear that." "It's not fair, Mom," Jordan said, his voice shaking. "You're not like that. You're not bad." "No, I'm not," Luna agreed, her voice steady. "And neither are you. But sometimes people say things that aren't true because they don't know the whole story, or because it's easier to believe rumors than to ask questions." Kai sniffled, looking at her with wide, questioning eyes. "But it hurts, Mom. When they laugh at us or say things about you, it really hurts." Luna let out a slow breath, her heart breaking for her boys. "Let me tell you something," she said. "When people say hurtful things, you have two choices. You can let their words break you, or you can prove them wrong. And the best way to prove them wrong isn't by fighting or yelling back. It's by being better than they ever thought you could be." Kai tilted his head, considering her words. "How?" "By letting your actions speak louder than their words." "You know," she began, her voice lighter now, "there have been so many people throughout history who were different, who didn't fit in at first, and they didn't let it stop them. Do you know about Martin Luther King Jr.? Kai shook his head, and Jordan furrowed his brow. "Who's that?" Jordan asked. Luna smiled. "He was a man who stood up for what was right, even when people tried to bring him down. He showed the world that being different wasn't something to hide, it was something to be proud of. He fought for people like us to be treated equally, and he never gave up, no matter how hard it got." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "And there are so many others, too, like Rosa Parks, who refused to give up her seat on a bus because she believed in fairness, or Maya Angelou, who used her words to inspire people all over the world." The boys listened intently, their eyes growing brighter with curiosity. "They didn't let the world tell them who they could be," Luna continued, "and neither will you. You can be anything you want, my loves. Work hard, be kind, show them that nothing they say can stop you. And one day, when they see how amazing you are, they'll realize they were wrong." Jordan wiped his nose with the sleeve of his shirt. "Do you think they will?" he asked. "I know they will," Luna said firmly, "because you are both so smart and strong and brave, and no one can take that away from you." As Luna tucked them into bed, she kissed each of their foreheads and whispered, "I believe in you. Always remember that." And as the boys drifted off to sleep, the whispers from the playground faded into the background, replaced by the sound of their mother's unwavering faith in them. It wasn't easy, but they were learning to rise above the hate, and they knew, deep down, that they weren't alone. Luna would always be there, their anchor in a world that sometimes felt too big and too cruel. The sun was just beginning to rise as Kai and Jordan hustled back and forth in their small garage, their hands busy with boxes and supplies. The garage wasn't much. It was crammed with old furniture, a few dusty boxes from when they'd first moved into the house, and an old workbench they'd transformed into a makeshift workspace. But to them, it felt like the starting point of something big. "Kai, careful with that," Jordan called out, his voice a mix of annoyance and laughter as his brother nearly toppled over a stack of books. "We don't have time to fix broken inventory." Kai rolled his eyes but grinned as he set the box down on the table. "Relax, Jordan, they're just books. Who's going to notice if one of them has a bent corner?" Jordan shot him a look, the kind only a slightly younger sibling could muster. "Everyone, that's who. Details matter, Kai. That's how you get repeat customers." "All right, Mr. CEO." Kai teased, wiping his hands on his jeans. What's next on the checklist? Jordan glanced at the notepad he had balanced on a stack of books. His handwriting was small and precise, with every item neatly numbered. We still need to double-check the gadgets and test the display sign and make sure the price tags are all clear. Luna appeared in the doorway with a soft smile on her face. You boys are up early, she said, her voice warm with pride. Jordan looked up, a pencil tucked behind his ear. We have to be, Mom. The fair starts at 9, and we want to get the best spot. You know how fast those corner tables get taken? Kai chimed in. Yeah, and Jordan's making me check everything a million times. Because we want it to be perfect, Jordan retorted, crossing his arms. Luna chuckled, stepping into the garage. Well, perfect or not, I'm already proud of you both. She set the mug down on the cluttered table and started helping them organize the books they had repurposed and decorated with vibrant, hand-drawn covers. These look amazing, she said, running her fingers over one of the designs. Who came up with the idea to add the custom artwork? Kai glanced at Jordan, a playful smirk tugging at his lips. That was me, Jordan snorted. It was both of us, Mom. Kai just wants all the credit. Luna laughed, shaking her head. Doesn't matter who thought of it. You're a team, and these are going to sell like hotcakes. By the time they loaded the car and arrived at the local fair, the boys' energy was palpable. They secured a spot under a shady tree, setting up their small folding table and a sign they had painted the night before. It read, Unique finds, books, and gadgets with a personal touch. Kai arranged the gadgets they'd repaired, an old radio that now worked like new, a small lamp with an upgraded energy-efficient bulb, and a few other odds and ends they'd salvaged and fixed up. Jordan, meanwhile, meticulously organized the books, making sure each one was displayed just right. Okay, Jordan said, stepping back to survey their setup. I think we're ready. Let's hope people actually stop by, Kai said, shoving his hands into his pockets. It didn't take long for their first customer to arrive. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a canvas tote bag stopped to browse through the books. She picked up one with a bright hand-drawn cover and turned it over in her hands. Did you boys make this? She asked, her tone impressed. Yes, ma'am, Jordan said, stepping forward. We found old books that were being thrown away and gave them a little makeover. They're all still great reads, and they make perfect gifts, Kai added with a friendly smile. The woman beamed. You boys are smart. How much for this one? $5, Jordan replied, and before long the woman walked away with 2 books and one of the small gadgets. It was like that for most of the day. People stopped by, drawn in by the boys' polite demeanor and creative products. Some asked about the gadgets, while others marveled at the colorful book covers. Kai and Jordan worked seamlessly, each playing to their strengths. Kai engaging customers with his easy charm, and Jordan handling the details like pricing and keeping track of sales. Luna watched from a distance, sitting on a bench under the shade of another tree. She didn't interfere, knowing this was their moment. Her heart swelled with pride every time she saw a customer walk away with one of their items, especially when the customer gave the boys a compliment. You boys are going to go far, one man said as he bought a small radio. Keep working hard, and you'll be running your own company someday. Kai laughed, scratching the back of his head. That's the plan. As the sun began to set, the boys started packing up their table, their energy finally waning, but their spirits high. They loaded the car, and on the drive home, the chatter was nonstop. Did you see that one guy who bought 3 books and a lamp? Kai said, turning in his seat to look at Jordan. He said we should start a website. Jordan nodded, his mind already buzzing with ideas. We could actually do that, you know. A website wouldn't be hard to set up. Luna glanced at them through the rearview mirror. I think it's a great idea. You two have something special. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. That evening, back at the kitchen table, they counted their earnings, excitement spilling over with each dollar bill they laid out. Kai leaned back in his chair with a satisfied grin. This is just the beginning. Jordan nodded, already scribbling ideas for their next project in his notebook. Next time, we can add more gadgets, maybe even take custom orders. Luna joined them at the table, resting her chin on her hand as she listened to them plan. She didn't say much, letting their enthusiasm fill the room. They had faced so much already, but here they were, turning their challenges into opportunities. The small room had become their world. It wasn't much, a spare bedroom in their modest house that had long ago been transformed into an office. The desk was a mix of worn wood and scratches, piled high with notebooks, sketches, and empty coffee cups. A whiteboard leaned against one wall, crammed with hastily drawn flowcharts and business plans. The room smelled faintly of ink, late-night instant noodles, and the undeniable energy of ambition. "All right," Kai muttered, leaning back in his chair and stretching his arms over his head. "The pitch deck is done. I think it's good, like really good." Jordan didn't even look up. "Yeah, what makes you think it's good? Did the PowerPoint fairy whisper in your ear?" Kai rolled his eyes. "No, genius. I mean, it feels strong, like it hits all the right points. It's clear, it's concise. It shows how we're different. Investors love that kind of stuff, right?" Jordan finally stopped scribbling and looked at his brother. "Investors love numbers, Kai. They love profitability. They love knowing that we're not just another couple of dreamers with a half-baked idea." Kai frowned, closing his laptop. "Our idea isn't half-baked. You know that. We've been planning this for years." "I know," Jordan said, rubbing his temples, "but we've got to make them see that. And these investors, they've seen it all. The pitches, the numbers, the big ideas. If we don't come in with something that blows them away." Kai sighed and leaned forward. "Look, we've done the work. We've done the research. We've run the numbers 1,000 times. They're going to see it, Jay. We just have to believe in it. Believe in us." Jordan studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, let's run through it one more time." They stayed up late that night, their voices bouncing off the bare walls as they rehearsed their pitch over and over again. Kai practiced his delivery, adding just the right amount of enthusiasm without sounding desperate. Jordan refined their financial projections, ensuring every slide in the deck was backed by cold, hard data. By the time they finally called it a night, the first rays of sunlight were creeping through the window, casting a soft glow on their tired but determined faces. The next morning, Luna stood outside their tiny office with a bag of breakfast sandwiches and 2 steaming cups of coffee. She knocked gently on the door before stepping in, her face lighting up when she saw her boys. "I figured you could use some fuel," she said, setting the food down on the cluttered desk. "Big day today, right?" "Biggest day," Kai said, his voice muffled as he stuffed half a sandwich into his mouth. Jordan took a sip of coffee and smiled at her. "Thanks, Mom. We might not survive this without you." Luna smiled back, but her hands fiddled nervously with the strap of her purse. "You boys are going to do great. You've worked so hard for this. Just be confident. You've got this." Her words stayed with them as they walked into the sleek, modern office building where the pitch was scheduled. Kai adjusted his tie in the mirror, grimacing at his reflection. "Why do I feel like I'm about to walk into a job interview?" Jordan stood beside him, fixing his own tie with calm precision. "Because this is bigger than a job interview, but don't worry, you'll talk their ears off before they even get a chance to say no." Kai grinned, nudging his brother. "That's the spirit." The pitch itself was nerve-wracking. The room was filled with suits, their expressions unreadable as they listened to the brothers explain their business model. Jordan handled the technical details, breaking down the numbers and explaining their innovative approach. Kai took over when it came to the vision, painting a picture of what their company could achieve and why it was worth investing in. By the time they finished, the room was silent for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then one of the investors, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, leaned forward. "You boys have something here," she said, her tone thoughtful. "It's risky, but it's bold, and I like bold." Outside the conference room, Luna sat nervously on a bench, clutching her purse tightly. When the boys walked out, their faces lit up with excitement. She immediately stood. "Well?" she asked, her voice full of anticipation. Kai threw his arms around her, lifting her off the ground. "We did it, Mom. They said yes." Jordan joined the hug, his grin wide. "It's happening, Mom. It's really happening." Luna's eyes filled with tears as she held her sons close. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. So proud." The months that followed were a whirlwind. Their small startup grew faster than they could have imagined. Late nights in the room turned into early mornings in a tiny rented office where they hired their first employees, a scrappy group of young professionals who believed in their vision. The brothers juggled meetings, product launches, and endless hours of planning, but through it all, they never lost sight of why they were doing it. One day, Jordan walked into their office with a newspaper in hand, the headline blaring in bold letters, "Brothers Revolutionize the Industry." He slapped it onto Kai's desk, grinning. "We made it." Kai picked up the paper, shaking his head in disbelief. "You think Williams has seen this yet?" Jordan's smile faded slightly, his tone turning serious. "He will. And when he does, He's going to realize what he lost. Their company quickly became a powerhouse in the industry, capturing market share from competitors, including Williams's business. The irony wasn't lost on them. The man who had abandoned them and their mother was now watching as they outpaced him at every turn. One evening, as the brothers celebrated their latest milestone, Kai kissed her cheek. "We couldn't have done it without you, Mom." Jordan nodded, his expression serious. "You taught us everything we know." This, he gestured to the bustling office around them, filled with their team and the hum of success. "This is because of you." Luna smiled through tears, her heart full. Her boys had turned their pain into purpose, their struggles into triumph, and as they stood together, she knew that this was only the beginning. Williams sat in his opulent office, a towering room encased in glass and polished wood, with sweeping views of the city skyline. The desk in front of him was cluttered with papers he hadn't touched, emails he hadn't answered, and reports he didn't want to read. His once pristine empire, a company he had built with pride and precision, was teetering on the edge. And for the first time in years, Williams didn't have control. The sharp buzz of his phone jolted him. It had been ringing all day with calls he dreaded taking. Board members, department heads, advisors, all scrambling for answers he didn't have. The phone vibrated again, flashing another message, this one from his CFO. "Market share dropped another 6% this quarter. We need a strategy, urgently." Williams let out a frustrated breath, tossing the phone onto his desk. He ran a hand through his perfectly combed hair, which was now showing streaks of gray he hadn't bothered to dye. The numbers were disastrous. For months, his competitors, new players in the market, had been eating away at his business, taking clients, undercutting contracts, and worst of all, dominating headlines. Everywhere he looked, there was news about this rising company, run by two young, brilliant entrepreneurs who had seemingly come out of nowhere. Their names were Kai and Jordan Bennett. Williams had heard them mentioned in meetings, in whispers, even in praise from some of his closest allies. But until now, he hadn't paid much attention. He had always assumed his business, his legacy, was untouchable. How could a pair of upstarts possibly threaten something as ironclad as the empire he had built? The latest report on his desk told a different story. Kai and Jordan's company had not only taken over key markets, but was now expanding globally. Their bold, innovative strategies were drawing in investors at a rate that made even Williams' achievements look small. And their latest move, a direct offer to buy out his company. Williams stood abruptly, pushing his chair back with enough force to send it rolling across the room. He grabbed the offer letter that had been emailed to him that morning. It was printed neatly on a single page, concise and unapologetic, much like the company's approach. The letter stated their intent to acquire his business at a price that was fair, generous even, considering the state of his dwindling market share. His chest tightened as he reread the signatures at the bottom. Kai Bennett, CEO, Jordan Bennett, COO. The names were as unfamiliar as they were infuriating. How dare they think they could buy him out, take over what he had spent a lifetime building? The thought made his blood boil. He crumpled the paper in his hand and hurled it toward the trash can. It missed, landing on the sleek marble floor, where it lay like a discarded relic of his failing empire. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was his assistant. He hit the speaker button with more force than necessary. "What?" he barked. "Sir?" Her voice was cautious, knowing his temper was at its breaking point. "The representatives from Bennett Industries are waiting in the conference room. They're here to discuss the offer." Williams froze. He hadn't expected them to show up in person. He had assumed they would send lawyers or some faceless negotiator. He wasn't ready for this, not now, not today, but his pride refused to let him back down. "I'll be there in 5 minutes," he said curtly, ending the call before she could respond. He straightened his tie in the mirrored surface of the window, forcing his breathing to steady. Whatever happened in that conference room, he would make it clear that no one, not even these so-called geniuses, could force him out of his own company. When he entered the room, the first thing he noticed was how young they looked. Kai and Jordan were seated at the long conference table, their posture relaxed, but their expressions sharp and focused. They were dressed simply but elegantly, tailored suits that didn't scream wealth but exuded confidence. For a moment, Williams felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. Jealousy? Intimidation? He shoved the feeling aside as he took his seat at the head of the table, his presence as commanding as ever. Kai was the first to speak. "Mr. Williams," he said, his tone polite but firm, "thank you for meeting with us." Williams studied him, noting the calm confidence in his voice. "I didn't have much of a choice, did I? You seem intent on forcing my hand." Jordan leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "We're not here to force anything. We're here to discuss an opportunity, one that benefits everyone." William smirked. "Benefits everyone? Don't insult my intelligence. You want my company, my name, my legacy. That's not exactly mutual benefit." Kai exchanged a glance with Jordan, and for a moment there was a flicker of something unspoken between them. Then Kai said, "It's true we want your company, but this isn't just business for us." Williams raised an eyebrow. "Oh, then what is it?" Jordan's voice was quieter, but no less steady. "It's personal." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Williams frowned, his eyes narrowing as he studied the two of them. There was something about their faces, something he couldn't quite place, but couldn't ignore either. A sharp line of the jaw, the way Kai furrowed his brows when he spoke. It all felt familiar. "What do you mean personal?" Williams asked, his tone laced with suspicion. Kai leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. "You don't recognize us, do you?" Williams's frown deepened. "Should I?" Jordan's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a restrained anger that Williams couldn't miss. "You should, because we're your sons." The room fell silent. The words hit Williams like a punch to the gut. He stared at them, his mind reeling. Sons? That wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible. And yet, as he looked at them again, really looked, the truth began to sink in. Their features, so much like his own when he was younger. Their eyes, intense, determined, and so painfully familiar. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. That's not true." "It is," Kai said firmly. "We're Kai and Jordan, Luna's sons, your sons." Williams felt the ground shift beneath him. Luna. He hadn't thought about her in years, hadn't allowed himself to, and now, here they were. The twins he had abandoned, grown into men who had not only survived without him, but had built something extraordinary, something that was now threatening to take everything he held dear. "You're lying," Williams said, his voice trembling with both denial and fear. Jordan's gaze hardened. "We're not, and deep down, you know it." Williams slumped back in his chair, the weight of their words crashing over him. He had spent years convincing himself that walking away from Luna and the boys had been the right choice, that it had been necessary. But now, staring into the faces of the sons he had forsaken, he felt the full force of his mistake. "I didn't know," he said weakly, though the excuse felt hollow even to him. Kai's expression didn't soften. "You didn't want to know." The silence that followed was suffocating. For the first time in his life, Williams didn't have the words, the power, or the control. All he had was regret. Regret and the faces of the sons who had returned, not for his love, but for his empire. The auditorium was alive with energy, the sound of applause echoing off the high ceilings. As Kai and Jordan walked onto the brightly lit stage, the brothers, now men who carried the weight of their success with grace, glanced briefly at each other before turning their attention to the crowd. Kai adjusted the microphone, the soft rustle of his movements amplified through the speakers. His jaw tightened for a moment, the emotion visible even from the back rows. But then he drew a deep breath and gave a small smile that instantly made him look younger, almost like the boy who once sat at the kitchen table doing homework under Luna's watchful eye. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice steady but full of feeling. "First, we want to thank you all for being here tonight. This moment means more to us than you'll ever know." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on a figure sitting quietly near the middle of the audience. Luna, their mother, the woman who had sacrificed everything for them. Kai's eyes softened as they met hers, and he felt a lump rise in his throat. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to continue. "When we started this company," he said, his voice slightly thick with emotion, "we didn't just have a business idea. We had a purpose, a mission to build something meaningful, something that would prove that no matter where you come from or what odds are stacked against you, you can rise above it all." Jordan stepped forward then, his presence steady and grounding. "But the truth is," Jordan added, picking up where his brother left off, "we didn't get here alone. There's someone in this audience tonight who is the reason we're standing here at all." He turned, gesturing toward their mother, and the room followed his gaze as a spotlight found Luna. Luna blinked, startled as the light bathed her in a warm glow. She froze for a moment, her hands clutching the edges of her chair, but then she gave a small, almost shy smile. The crowd murmured softly, craning their necks to see her. She looked radiant, though she didn't realize it. The years of hard work and quiet resilience had given her a strength that shone through her modest demeanor. "Our mom," Kai said, his voice breaking slightly as he spoke the word. He cleared his throat, blinking rapidly. "She's the strongest person we know. When the world turned its back on her, she didn't give up. She fought for us. She raised us to be strong, to love ourselves, and to never give up, no matter what." Jordan stepped closer to the microphone, his hand gripping its edge tightly as he spoke. "You all see us now," he said, his tone growing firmer. "You see the success, the headlines, the deals, but what you don't see is the story behind it. The nights when our mom worked late just to make sure we had food on the table. The times she stayed up with us when we were sick, even though she was exhausted. The way she encouraged us even when the world was cruel to her. You don't see the strength it took for her to walk through those storms and come out the other side." The crowd was silent now, the weight of their words hanging in the air. Kai glanced at Jordan, nodding slightly before he continued. "When people said she wasn't enough, when they judged her unfairly, she didn't let it stop her. She taught us that what others say doesn't define you. It's what you do that matters." Jordan turned back towards Luna, his voice softening as he spoke directly to her. "Mom, this success," he said, motioning to the stage, the crowd, the lights, "it's not just ours, it's yours. You're the reason we're here. Everything we've built, everything we've achieved, it's because of you." His voice cracked on the last word, and he quickly wiped at his eyes, laughing lightly to cover the emotion. Kai smiled at his brother, then turned to the audience, his voice growing stronger. "So tonight," he said, "we dedicate this moment to her. To the woman who didn't just give us life, but gave us the courage to live it fully. Mom, this is for you." The room erupted into applause, a thunderous ovation that seemed to shake the walls. Luna sat frozen for a moment, tears streaming down her face as the weight of their words sank in. She wasn't someone who sought the spotlight, but in that moment, she let herself feel it. The pride, the love, the overwhelming validation of everything she had endured. Slowly she stood, her hands trembling as she pressed them to her mouth. The applause only grew louder as people rose to their feet, turning the ovation into a standing one. Kai and Jordan stepped down from the stage, walking toward her through the cheering crowd. When they reached her, they both wrapped their arms around her, pulling her into a tight embrace. "We love you, Mom," Kai whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Jordan nodded, his own tears falling freely now. "We couldn't have done it without you." Luna, overwhelmed, could barely speak. "I love you too," she managed to say, her voice trembling. "I'm so proud of you both." As the three of them stood there, holding on to one another in the middle of the crowd, it was clear that this moment wasn't just about success. The applause finally began to die down, but Luna was still standing, her hands trembling as she wiped at the tears streaming down her face. She didn't know how long she had stood there, her son's arms wrapped protectively around her, shielding her from the world in a way she had once done for them. Her heart felt heavy with emotions, relief, pride, and a strange, quiet sense of vindication that she had never dared to hope for. As the crowd settled, people began to approach her, some hesitant, others with bright smiles. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a nervous smile was the first to step forward. "Luna," she said softly, her hands clasped in front of her. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I used to believe what they said about you. I didn't know the truth, but now, after hearing your sons, after seeing what you've been through, you're incredible, truly." Luna blinked, startled by the woman's sincerity. For years, the only words people had directed at her were sharp, cruel, cutting. She wasn't used to this, being seen for who she truly was, being understood. She nodded slowly. "Thank you. That means a lot." The woman gave her hand a gentle squeeze before stepping aside, allowing another person to approach. This time it was a man in his 50s, his expression both apologetic and earnest. "Luna," he began, his voice firm but tinged with regret. "I used to work with Williams. I heard the things he said about you, the rumors he spread, and I'm ashamed to admit I didn't question it. I should have. I should have looked past the lies, but I didn't. I'm sorry for being a part of that." Luna took a shaky breath, her throat tightening as she looked into his eyes. There was no malice there, no pity, just a genuine apology. For years, she had carried the weight of the world's judgment on her shoulders, but now, little by little, it was lifting. "Thank you," she said again, her voice stronger this time. I appreciate you saying that. As the man stepped back, a younger woman approached with a notepad and a camera slung over her shoulder. A journalist. She looked nervous, almost as if she wasn't sure if she should be there. "Miss Luna," she began cautiously, "I'm writing an article on the event, and I was wondering if you'd be open to sharing your story. The truth, I mean. People deserve to hear it from you." Luna hesitated, her hands tightening around the edges of her simple dress. The media had been her enemy, twisting her life into cruel headlines and sensational lies. But this time, something felt different. This wasn't about tearing her down. This was about giving her the voice she had been denied for so long. She glanced at Kai and Jordan, who were standing a few steps behind her, their proud smiles encouraging her. I'll think about it," she said finally, and the journalist nodded with understanding. As the crowd continued to thin, Kai and Jordan stepped back beside her, their presence a steadying force. "How are you feeling, Mom?" Kai asked gently, his voice low, so only she could hear. Luna let out a soft, shaky laugh. "Overwhelmed," she admitted, looking at him and Jordan with teary eyes. "But in a good way, I think." Another murmur rippled through the remaining crowd as someone asked, "What about their skin color? Wasn't that the whole, issue back then?" The question hung in the air, and for a brief moment, Luna felt her chest tighten. But before she could speak, Jordan stepped forward, his voice clear and unwavering. "We're proud of our skin color," he said firmly, looking directly at the person who had asked. His words were strong, but his tone wasn't defensive. It was proud, full of dignity. "It's part of who we are, and it's part of who our mother is. Our mother is of mixed race. She never hid it, but people didn't care to know the truth. They were too busy judging. And when we were born, they called it a scandal, when really it was a celebration of love and heritage. So no," he added, his voice rising just slightly, "there's nothing to explain, and there's nothing to apologize for." The room fell silent for a moment, and then someone in the audience began to clap. Then another and another. Soon the entire room was erupting into applause once again, this time louder than before. The pride on Luna's face was unmistakable as she looked at her sons, her heart swelling with gratitude. They had grown into men who were not just strong and successful, but kind and brave, everything she had ever hoped for them. "You boys," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion, "you've made me prouder than I ever thought possible." As the applause continued, Luna stood a little taller, her heart lighter than it had been in years. The past couldn't be erased, but it no longer held power over her. In this moment, surrounded by her sons and supported by a world that was finally ready to listen, she felt free. She wasn't just Luna, the woman they once called a gold digger or a cheater. She was Luna, the mother, the fighter, the survivor. From the back of the room, Williams watched the scene unfold, his chest tightening with a mix of emotions he could barely name: pride, regret, shame. He clapped along with the audience, though it felt hollow in his hands. He wanted to stand, to go to her, to them, but his feet felt like they were rooted to the floor. What right did he have to join in this moment, to claim even a sliver of the joy that was so clearly hers? As the applause died down, the event moved into its closing moments, but Williams couldn't focus. His mind raced as he watched Kai and Jordan leave the stage to join Luna in the audience, their arms draped protectively around her as more people approached to congratulate them. He lingered in his seat as the crowd began to disperse, unsure of what to do next. Part of him wanted to leave quietly, to slip away before anyone noticed him. But another part, the part that had brought him here in the first place, wouldn't let him. Finally, he stood, his legs heavy as he made his way down the aisle. The closer he got to them, the harder it was to breathe. He saw Luna first, her back turned to him as she spoke with a well-wisher. Kai and Jordan stood beside her, their expressions light as they laughed at something someone had said. They looked happy. They looked complete. Williams hesitated, his hand twitching at his side. What could he even say? How could he begin to fix the years he had thrown away? Luna turned then, her eyes landing on him. For a moment, her face froze, the warmth replaced by something colder, sharper, anger, hurt, and something that looked like pity. Kai and Jordan followed her gaze, their laughter fading as they recognized him. Williams cleared his throat, his voice trembling as he spoke. Luna, Kai, Jordan. He paused, unsure of what else to say. His throat felt dry, and the weight of their stares made him feel small in a way he never had before. I don't deserve forgiveness, I know that, but I needed to say, I'm sorry. For a moment, no one spoke. The air between them was heavy with years of unspoken pain and unresolved emotions. Finally, Kai broke the silence, his voice calm but firm. We didn't succeed for you, he said, his words cutting but honest. We succeeded because of her. Jordan nodded, his expression unreadable. You made your choices, and so did we. Luna stepped forward then, her gaze steady as she looked Williams in the eye. I don't know if I can forgive you, Williams. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I hope, for your sake, that you find a way to live with what you've done. Her words weren't cruel, but they weren't kind either. They were simply the truth, and they hung in the air as Williams nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping under the weight of them. He turned and walked away, his steps heavy, his heart heavier. As he disappeared into the crowd, Luna turned back to her sons, her expression softening as she looked at them. Kai placed a hand on her shoulder, and Jordan smiled faintly. They didn't need to say anything. They were a family, and nothing, not the past, not Williams, not the pain they had endured, could take that away from them.